So, your engine just blew. You're thinking of doing an engine swap, you say, and you're not sure whether to keep it stock, throw in a 4-valve, a Coyote, or maybe even an LS. Well, folks, you've come to the right place. Come on. Because today, we're going to end that debate once and for all. Ford, Chevy, Coyote, Hellcat, which one is the best swap to do for your Crown Victoria or Panther car? Time to bruise a few egos and hurt a few butts. Here we go. Oh shit, he's got the whiteboard out. You know what that means, right? Shit's about to get serious. So in today's video, we're gonna discuss what the best engine swap is to do to your Crown Vic / Panther car. Now the engines that are gonna be considered go as follows. We got the 4-valve, which will include engines from the Marauder, the old Cobra, the old Lincoln Mark 8s, hell, even the Lincoln Aviator. The other swaps we're going to be discussing is the 5.4 single overhead cam swap, usually off the older model F-150s and even Ford Expeditions. As you can see, we'll also be discussing the Coyote swap, and just for the sake of price and keeping things cheap, we're strictly going to focus on the F-150 based Coyote engine for this particular swap. And for those of you who can read that far, yes, that is a Hellcat swap. Believe it or not, when I was considering doing an engine swap on this Crown Vic behind me, a lot of people suggested that I put a Hellcat engine in it. So we're going to discuss the logistics of doing such a swap. And of course, we can't leave out the LS swap, which obviously the car behind me happens to have. And last but not least, as a bonus, we'll even discuss the option of actually just modifying the 2-valve that you already have in your Panther car with some forced induction and seeing how that stacks up compared to just doing an engine swap. Okay, so now that we have the most common engine swaps that are usually done on a Panther car, or that are the most suggested by your average person who happens to watch these videos, what you're looking at right here, these categories are argument points to make a reasonable comparison and pick the top 3 swaps to do. We're gonna just end the debate today. After this video, these will be the top 3 swaps to do to your Panther car based off the following points. First, we have the overall price. That includes the prices of the engine and accompanying parts to get the lowest possible overall price, the most budget-friendly price for that build. Next up, we have how easy is it to install? How much modification and fabrication is required for each said engine swap? And for the sake of keeping it simple, I'm just going to use an easy, medium, and hard difficulty for each install. Next up is performance. And to keep it simple, that's pretty much just out of the box, how much power does each engine make in its stock form? Next up is modability, and to piggyback off of the performance category, and that's just pretty much just how well and how easy it is to add even more power to the swapped power plant, whether it's bolt-ons or forced induction. And last but not least, it's reliability, and I'm just going to grade that from a 1 through a 10, and that just boils down to how reliable is each engine swap with all the power adders and all the mods that we would potentially install. And the most important question is the juice worth the squeeze? Okay, so the first swap we're going to talk about is pretty much the easiest and one of the most common Crown Vic Panther car engine swaps, and that is the good old 4-valve. Now, I'll say this one more time before I continue. The following is based on my actual experience doing swaps, and we will be using the cheapest possible examples, using sources like junkyards, group forums, marketplace, and eBay as our basis, as our baseline for the figures and quotes that I will be using in the following video. All right, so now that we got that out of the way, let's start with the overall price for doing a 4-valve engine swap. In this case, keeping it cheap, we're going to use the bottom end of an 03 Mustang Mach 1. We're going to use the heads of a Lincoln Continental, and we're going to use the upper intake of a Mercury Marauder, all while recycling and reworking just the regular Crown Vic accessories that already came in the car along the way, which brings us to a swap price of $4,200. Now, obviously, these prices can vary, especially if you do the work yourself. Although as we get further along into these swaps, it does get harder for the everyman to pull off some of these. So we're just going to assume that at one point or another, you're just going to use a shop to assist you with your installs. Just keep that in mind moving forward, that yes, at one point, you're going to have to use the assistance of a shop. Now, as far as ease of install, the 4-valve is going to earn an easy rank, pretty much due to the fact that the engine just pretty much just bolts right in. Not only does it just bolt right in, but it actually has enough clearance to spare during hard driving and hard pulls. But be prepared for an electrical nightmare. That's because there are sensors and components that are specific to the 4-valve motor that the 2 valves don't come with. Now, as far as performance goes, the 4-valve swap gets a 5 out of 10, with roughly just about 50 more horsepower over a stock 2-valve. The 4-valve leaves a lot to be desired, especially given the nightmare fuel wiring you're going to go through just to barely beat a stock 2-valve by a fender, or in some cases, which I've learned the hard way, losing to a gutted and Marty tuned Crown Vic.
Hawk yeah, let it be.
Doing a 4-valve swap is less desirable the more you sit and analyze it, and it only gets worse. Now, as far as modability of the 4-valve engine, there's a few good options. You can possibly squeeze another 30 or maybe even 50 horsepower with just a few bolt-ons in its naturally aspirated form. To see any noticeable power gains, you're going to want to have to go with forced induction. And now we'd be talking another $2,000 to $5,000 more to what you've already spent on doing the swap. So it gets a 5 out of 10 when it comes to modability. Which brings us to our final category for the 4-valve swap, and that's reliability. And if you keep it in a fairly stock form, the 4-valve for the most part can be pretty reliable. But let's be honest, you're not spending all that money and labor just to barely beat a regular Crown Vic by a fender. You want some power, but sadly, with great power, the 4-valve has not so great reliability. Take my old Mach 1 for example. The car was a bolt-on NA build, and then it wasn't long before one of the pistons decided to Epstein itself and leave me stranded 3 states away. All that work, all those man hours, for nothing. And I'm not the only example. Talk to any actual hardcore 4-valve engine owner, and you'll notice they're usually by their second or third 4-valve engine. For that reason, it's why the 4-valve engine gets a 5 out of 10 in reliability. Now up next we have a not so common engine swap, but one of the coolest, and that is the Ford single overhead cam 5.4 liter, sometimes known as the lightning swap. As far as the pricing goes, it's not the engine itself per se that is going to drive the prices up on this build. No. It's going to be the amount of modification and fab work required to make that damn thing work. That, unless you are a master mechanic, a shop will definitely be making you its bitch for this one. So including engine, fab work, shop hours, and retrofitting, expect to pay around $6,000 for just the swap alone. So now that we got that out of the way, exactly just how easy is it to do a 5.4 single overhead cam swap on your Panther car? Well, between having to modify the torque converter flex plate along with a custom header configuration, there's rearranging the intake piping, not to mention the absolute tuning nightmares that these 5.4 swaps can be. That's why it earns a hard on the how easy is it to install scale. Now, when it comes to performance, unless you're looking for a tire shredding burnout machine, then the 5.4 swap is just for you. Otherwise, you're going to want to look elsewhere. That's because the 5.4 actually makes less horsepower than a stock 2-valve. But where it makes up for it is in the torque department. So the 5.4 swap gets a 3 out of 10 when it comes to performance. Next up we have modability, and by far the most common support mod to do to a 5.4 is to add a supercharger. Fortunately, you'll only be making just slightly more power than a stock Marauder would make, which earns the 5.4 swap a 5 out of 10 when it comes to modability. Now, besides having a few spark plug ejection issues, the 5.4 single overhead cam isn't entirely catastrophically unreliable. As long as boost levels are kept modest and low, it gets a 6 out of 10 in the reliability category. Next up, we have the Coyote swap. Now, it's my personal opinion that this would have been the absolute best engine to swap into a Crown Vic or any Panther car. The 5.0 Coyote checks every box on this list except one: the price. No, folks, your eyes are not deceiving you if you can't see from that far. You're looking at $10,000 or $15,000. Now, a lot of people don't know this, but a little while ago, I was actually in the talks with a very popular local shop that actually does Coyote swaps on all types of Fords. And I was dead set on Coyote swapping my Crown Vic all the way up until I was given a bottom line dollar price of $10,000 for the swap. Mind you, that's if I went with an automatic transmission for the swap. Had I gone the manual transmission way, it would have came up to $15,000. And although first gen and second gen Coyote power plants have been significantly dropping down in price. Even at the bottom of the barrel prices, you're still looking at right around $8,000 for a Coyote swap as of 2024. Now, as far as ease of install goes, the Coyote swap gets a medium. There is some fab work that will require the radiator to be moved forward 1 inch, along with repurposing and modifying how the power steering pump mounts. And some clearance issues will require modifications to your cross member, good catch, huh? Your oil pump, and a custom drive shaft to go along with it. Now, as far as performance goes, the Coyote swap gets an 8 out of 10. With high revving RPMs and 400 horsepower ready to go out of the gate, it's more than enough for that 4,000-pound boat to make some damn waves. Now, modability gets an 8 out of 10 with a plethora of aftermarket mods and parts you can buy for high performance NA builds, and hell, even some badass forced induction builds. And the Coyote platform has an endless supply of cheap and affordable performance mods to add to it, and that damn engine loves it. Which is why I'm giving it a 9 out of 10 when it comes to reliability. Now, there is a few lifter issues here and there, but the Coyote engine has been known to go hundreds of thousands of miles, some of them even decently modified, without having any real issues. Now, let's talk about the Hellcat swap. Now, some of you watching this might be made up out of money. Every atomic cell in your body is probably made up of dollar bills, but you know what? My broke ass sure ain't. And let me tell you, between the $15,000 and $20,000 alone, just for the swap alone, already doesn't make it worth it. Not to me, at least. Because let me tell you, if I had $20,000 to just throw on a car, I sure as hell wouldn't spend it on an engine swap that I can just drive down the street, the car can get totaled, it can get crashed, hell, it can get stolen. $20,000 literally just flushed down the drain. Now, as far as ease of install goes, this swap also earns a hard. From having to fabricate the engine and trans mounts, to the shift linkage, the drive shaft, and even cutting into the damn engine firewall just to make more room. Now, obviously, the performance aspect of a Hellcat swap Crown Vic is an automatic 10 out of 10. Considering you would already have all the power adders out of the box, who in their right mind wouldn't want a freaking 700 horsepower supercharged Crown Vic to throw around? Now, as far as modability goes, the Hellcat swap Crown Vic will get a 6 out of 10, considering that the engine is almost pretty much maxed out of the gate, not leaving much more room for improvement or a lot of modifications without blowing even more ridiculous amounts of money. Which brings us to reliability, and honestly, I'll give it a 7 out of 10. I know people hate on Hellcats and all that stuff, but you know what? These engines are built to handle a lot of abuse and a lot of power, although they have been known to have some supercharger issues, but 7 out of 10 is pretty reasonable. And I guess you could say I saved the best for last. Ladies and gentlemen, the golden standard of engine swaps, the American apple pie, peanut butter, and jelly of swaps, the legendary LS. Folks, we have sitting behind me the undisputed champs of engine swaps, the almighty Chevrolet LS. Coming in at literally one of the cheapest install prices at $3,500 total, with just the engine alone only costing $800, and even beat out the freaking 2-valve when it comes to buying a cheap junkyard affordable engine. As far as ease of install goes, the LS gets an easy rank. With no cutting or welding required, the engine literally bolts right up using the adapter plates made for the Mustangs that work perfectly, surprisingly enough, on the Crown Vic. You can even keep and use the OEM Vic radiator setup. As far as performance goes, the LS gets a 7 out of 10 with between 30 to 50 more horsepower out of the gate over the stock 2-valve. And then just throw in a shitload of torque from the stock truck LS engine. And hell, it even has the best of the 5.4. Overall, it's just a damn good time around. Now, when it comes to modability, the Chevy LS is pretty much undefeated. There really isn't another engine platform besides, I'd say, maybe some Honda engines that have this much aftermarket support. With just a cam, exhaust, upgraded intake, and a tune, the car behind me makes 370 horsepower, naturally aspirated. That's not even counting forced induction, turbos, superchargers, twin turbos. That brings these engines anywhere between 800 to 1,000 horsepower. All that still within a fraction to what some of these NA engine swaps would have cost to even install. You're going to have a 1,000 horsepower Crown Vic for what it costs to maybe put in a freaking 5.4 Coyote. And it's for those reasons and so many more that I can't list in this video because it'd be an hour long, that the Chevy LS swap is going to get a 10 out of 10 when it comes to mod. Now, as far as reliability goes, if you want to do a simple experiment, just go on Marketplace and see how many 200,000, 300,000 Chevy Tahoes and Silverados you'll see still out and about in the world today. These engines are the definition of bulletproof, although they have had some valve spring issues and timing chain issues can pop up on rare occasions. With that being said, it's still going to get a 9.5 out of 10 when it comes to reliability. Now, is it worth going through all the trouble that we talked about installing one of these engine swaps that we talked about today? Or would it be cheaper and less time consuming to just build the 2-valve that's already in your stock Crown Vic? Well, the answer to that is a yes and no. I've done the naturally aspirated 2-valve builds, and the most I was able to accomplish was being faster than a Marauder, and just barely. And if you decide to go forced induction on your 2-valve, if you want a kit that's going to directly fit and it's just going to be plug and play, that can run you upwards to $4,000 to $6,000. So you're going to spend $6,000 on supercharging your Crown Vic. You're going to dyno tune it, and you're probably, if you're lucky, you might get maybe 380, 370 horsepower. You'll barely break even close to 400, and your engine is pretty much to its limits. I'm not full of shit. You talk to anybody who has a supercharged 2-valve Crown Vic, unless you're spending well into the thousands to bulletproof that shit. 400 horsepower is where you're going to be maxing out before that thing goes and meets its maker. Whereas the good old LS right here making 370 horsepower. Do you see any forced induction on this piece of crap? There isn't a damn thing on this thing. I'm going to put a big ass turbo, some intercooler. It's going to be shooting flames out this mofo. Still cheaper than what it would even cost to supercharge a 2-valve and be stuck at 400 horsepower, where this thing will be way into the 600s, if not even more. So if you've made it this far into the video and you are on the fence as to what engine swap, if any, to do to your Crown Vic or Panther car, here are my top 3, guys. I suggest that number 1 is going to be an LS swap. Number 2, surprisingly enough, will be to actually upgrade the 2-valve you already have in there. Throw a supercharger in it, upgrade the internals, get it nice and tuned. And even then, that's still a more practical and affordable route than my third suggestion, which will be a Coyote swap. There's still a few shops out there that are trying to develop, make easier swap kits. Hopefully it'll drop the prices down. But as it stands, if you're going to do an engine swap on these big ass boats, you're going to want to go with a good old Chevrolet. But if you are a purist, a diehard, bleed blue motherfucker, well, just upgrade your 2-valve and try to kick some ass, man. Either way, let's keep these cars going, man. I don't care what kind of engine you got to put in these things to keep them going. Keep them going. That is our mission as part of this Panther community. That's all that matters, guys. Have fun with them. Kick some ass. Any Marauder guys want to challenge me with the LS Vic, bring it on. Send me a comment. Send me a DM. Send me a DM on Instagram. Either ways, I'll catch you guys on the next video. What engine swap are you going to do? Did I change your mind? Did I convince a few of you? Did I make believers out of a few of you? Am I full of shit? Either way, I'll catch you guys on the next one.